The FIA has just accidentally handed one Formula One team a devastating head start over Mercedes for 2026, and the implications for the championship are absolutely insane. An explosive technical loophole in the 2026 regulations has created a scenario that could define the entire season before the first race even begins. Similar to how Mercedes received a brutal initial advantage with the 2014 regulations that led to 8 consecutive championships, another team has now accidentally been given a massive edge over everyone else for the new rule set coming into effect. The debate about who will replicate Mercedes' 2014 dominance in the new era has been a hot topic for the last 12 months, and a recent report claims one F1 team is currently in pole position to do exactly that. If you want to stay on top of everything happening in F1, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. Red Bull has emerged as the team that accidentally received this massive advantage through a compression ratio controversy in the 2026 power unit regulations. The Austrian team, along with Mercedes, is under intense scrutiny over their approach to the compression ratio rules for the new engines. This technical interpretation could deliver Red Bull a significant 410 engine advantage over rivals like Ferrari, completely reshaping the competitive balance before anyone turns a wheel. The compression ratio war has been declared, and Red Bull appears to have found a legal loophole that the FIA never intended to create. The new F1 regulations promise to completely reshape the grid in 2026, marking the first new engine formula since the start of the turbo hybrid era in 2014. Back in that year, Mercedes emerged as the dominant force with their power unit, proving to be the benchmark against all other engine manufacturers on the grid. Mercedes-Benz thrived by conquering 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships in the first 8 years of the new regulations, while other engine suppliers scrambled to catch up. This created one of the most dominant eras in F1 history, with Mercedes winning almost everything in sight for nearly a decade. The compression ratio controversy centers on how teams interpret the technical regulations for the 2026 power units. Mercedes and Red Bull have reportedly found ways to push the boundaries of what's permitted under the rules regarding compression ratios in their engines. This isn't about illegal modifications, but rather exploiting grey areas in the regulations that the FIA didn't properly close when writing the rules. The advantage could be worth several tenths of a second per lap, which in modern F1 represents an absolutely enormous gap. Ferrari has already raised concerns that they're being penalized for 2026 before the season even starts. The Italian team believes the Mercedes and Red Bull engine approach, while technically legal, violates the spirit of the regulations. Ferrari's complaints suggest they either didn't spot this loophole themselves or chose not to exploit it, putting them at a potential disadvantage from day one. The Scuderia's frustration is palpable, as they watch rivals potentially gain months or even years of development advantage through this technical interpretation. But what this compression ratio advantage really means for Red Bull's 2026 campaign will shock you. The 410 engine advantage could translate to dominating qualifying sessions and controlling race pace from the front, exactly like Mercedes did in 2014. If Red Bull's power unit proves superior right out of the gate, they could run away with both championships, while other teams spend the entire season playing catch-up. This scenario would be devastating for fans, hoping the 2026 regulations would create closer competition rather than another era of single-team dominance. The 2026 power unit rules are dramatically different from current specifications, removing the complex MGU-H system and significantly increasing electrical power output. Teams must completely redesign their engines to meet the new formula, which splits power generation equally between the internal combustion engine and the electric motor. The regulations were supposed to make engines simpler and encourage new manufacturers to enter, but technical loopholes like the compression ratio controversy show the rules still contain exploitable grey areas. Honda, Ferrari, Renault Alpine, Mercedes, and Audi are all developing power units for the new era. 4 teams are reportedly set to receive major advantages heading into the 2026 season, based on various factors, including power unit partnerships and technical expertise. Red Bull's compression ratio advantage is just one element of what could be a completely reshuffled competitive order. Teams that nail the new regulations early will have an enormous edge, while those who struggle could face years of trying to catch up. The engineering investments happening right now are shaping which teams will succeed or fail when the new rules arrive. Mercedes faces particular pressure after their dominant 2014-2020 run ended with Red Bull's recent championship success. The German manufacturer desperately wants to reclaim their position at the front, but if Red Bull has already found a compression ratio advantage, Mercedes could be starting on the back foot despite their experience with regulation changes. Being under FIA scrutiny alongside Red Bull suggests Mercedes also found loopholes, but whether their approach proves as effective as Red Bull's remains uncertain. The FIA now faces difficult decisions about whether to close these compression ratio loopholes before 2026 arrives. Changing regulations this late in the development cycle would be controversial, potentially forcing teams to redesign engines they've already invested millions developing. However, allowing the loopholes to stand could create another era of dominance that contradicts the FIA's stated goal of closer competition. The governing body's accidental creation of this advantage has put them in an impossible position with no easy solutions. Teams like McLaren, Aston Martin, Williams, Racing Bulls, and Haas must rely on their engine suppliers to stay competitive in 2026. If Mercedes or Ferrari power units fall behind Red Bull's advantaged engine, all their customer teams automatically suffer regardless of chassis quality. This creates a tiered system where power unit advantages determine championship potential before teams even design their cars. Alpine and Sauber Audi are developing their own power units, giving them control over their destiny, but also enormous technical and financial risk. The parallels to Mercedes' 2014 advantage are striking and terrifying for fans who remember that era's predictability. Mercedes' power unit superiority in 2014 was so massive that even customer teams using their engines were competitive against works teams with different power units. If Red Bull achieves similar dominance through this compression ratio advantage, the 2026 season could be decided before it starts. The FIA's accidental gift to Red Bull might have just locked in years of Austrian dominance at exactly the moment the sport needed a competitive reset. The engineering complexity of the 2026 power units makes early advantages even more difficult to overcome than in previous regulation changes. Teams are investing massive resources right now to prepare for the new formula. But if Red Bull has found a fundamental advantage through the compression ratio loophole, catching up could take multiple seasons. The technical knowledge and understanding required to exploit these regulations effectively separates the top teams from the rest of the grid. Red Bull's reputation for finding and maximizing regulatory loopholes has served them brilliantly once again. Do you think the FIA should close this compression ratio loophole before 2026? Or let teams keep the advantages they've found? The fact that Red Bull has accidentally been handed such a massive head start over Mercedes and other rivals raises serious questions about whether the 2026 regulations will deliver the competitive racing everyone hoped for.